Welcome to That's Derm Good. Hey everyone, it's Janelle. So when I'm not interviewing guests for That's Derm Good, I am managing my company, BC Educators. This special episode features Biologic Coordinator Roundtable discussion in the Access Blueprint series. Listen in as 4 Biologic Coordinators, myself, and 3 guests discuss processes, challenges, wins, and how to improve patient access. Enjoy! Welcome to the Access Blueprint. So today we have 3 amazing Biologic Coordinator panelists in our roundtable discussion. I'm so excited to introduce you all to Shannon Tuminello. Shannon is Biologic Coordinator. I've known you for a while. It feels like it's been years.
Yeah.
But Shannon has been in dermatology for over 10 years, and she's just driven to get patients on their medication and treatment. Also, just being a great advocate for patients. Well, you've been in dermatology for over 22 years, and as bio coordinator specifically for about over 10 years now, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. So I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, we're excited to have you. I also have Trinity Carver. Trinity has worked in dermatology for over 5 years and recently transitioned from in-office to a remote role. Very passionate for patient care and education. So I'm really excited to have you on and join us today. So thank you for joining us, Trinity.
Yes, excited to be here.
And then lastly, we have Tammy Bragg. Tammy has been a certified medical assistant for over 30 years and a biologic coordinator in dermatology for the last 12 years. So I've just gotten to know you recently and so excited to just have so many conversations with you, and also as an advocate for patients, but as a speaker, educator for other biologic coordinators. So it's such a pleasure to have you on, Tammy, and join in the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. So first, I want the audience to know you guys just a little bit and let everybody just hear a little bit of why you got into the access space. What keeps you motivated to stay in this space?
I'll go first. So yes, I have been in dermatology for 22 years, and I feel like over the 2 decades that I've been doing this, I've kind of like shifted my focus to one thing and to the next. And since these new biologics started coming out, when I started realizing that there was a process that needed to be followed and that there were a lot of patients that were being told no and they weren't getting access to their medications, and we were having to fall back on, liver toxic medicines or things that weren't effective for the patients. And I was like, wait, someone's got to learn this process and learn this system and beat it. So I kind of volunteered for that. And while doing that, I've just really fallen in love with biologics, what they do for patients, how they change patients' lives. It was one thing that the patients were being told no, but it was another that they were being kept away from biologic medicines that were safe and effective and life-changing for these patients. So I just continued to grow in this space because of that, because of how big of an impact it has on patients' lives.
Absolutely. What about you, Tammy?
Well, I got it by osmosis. Quite honestly, I moved from Florida. I was in a derm office, and I moved to Georgia. I started with a practice and I took a job as triage supervisor. And I was helping doing like pathology and surgical calls. Um, During my onboarding session, it was probably the last day of training, and the office administrator, in his parting gift to me, handed me this huge 3-ring binder. It was like this big, and he's like, "Oh, and by the way, you're going to be our biologic coordinator. Have a nice day," you know. And that's how I got the position. I very quickly learned that it was going to take a lot of education and researching on my part because nobody knew anything back then. I mean, 13 years ago, it's been almost 13 years. I mean, there was 2 biologics, and so there's been a lot of learning and a lot of struggling. But in that 13 years, I learn every day. There's not something that I don't learn new every day, and I really have enjoyed the journey. I enjoy my patients. I enjoy being an educator and an advocate for them. They need help. We all know that. And we're the ones that are helping them with our team. And I'm just excited every time I'm able to get a win for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun seeing how biologics have evolved, especially when you've started just in dermatology and getting thrown into that role, which I have a very similar story to that as well. It's like, here's the biologics, here you go. But it's really cool to see how much things have changed. And, so for the three of us, we're pretty seasoned. Trinity is probably one of the younger ones. Trinity, tell us how you got into access and what keeps you motivated to keep going.
So I was the youngest medical assistant at my practice, and I was there for about a year. And our biologic coordinator just quit, and my boss was like, "I think you're the perfect fit." And I think I cried every day for a month. I was like, "I can't do this. This is terrible. I hate it. Like, this is not for me. Like, I want to go back on the floor. Like, I want to work with those patients." And then it was like one day, like amidst my 57th mental breakdown, it just clicked in my head and I was like, oh, we're lacking XYZ, and that's why it's not working. And it was like once I really started to dive really deep into why our process was not working with the mass amount of patients that we had, it just clicked. And then I was like, I really like this. And I seen there was such a need in my area for the patients to be able to get their meds because they were just slapped on something with no rhyme or reason and they were all getting denied. And I just felt like I was the target until one day I really started sitting down with all of these patients and educating them on why this is happening. And it just turned out to be like a niche for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So, this session I'm really excited for. We've got some really good things in here, some good conversational topics. We're going to hit on some of the approaches, some of the challenges that we've run into, some of our wins, because, to me, I think it's so important to not only talk about the issues and challenges, but also highlight the wins, highlight how we're fixing things, because it's one thing to complain about something without a solution, and it's another to have that solution so that we can share that solution and help others so that we can really get better at this role. I mean, like you said, Tammy, we're always constantly learning things and everything has changed a lot, but it just fuels that passion as we see those wins that we're seeing with our patients. Also, a little highlight on some peer learning, some advice, things that we can share with anyone else that is listening that, maybe they're just starting out. Maybe they are newer in this role for maybe a couple of years. Maybe they've been in this role for a while. And, there's always some pearls that we can take. So I always love having other coordinators on that we can collaborate with. And that was the whole purpose behind the BC Collaborative app, where we can connect with each other and share those wins, share those new things that we've learned. Also, lastly, we're going to have kind of towards the end, we're going to do a little lightning round. And we're calling it Challenge Accepted. So we'll have a few little questions to see what that issue was, how you fixed it. Sharing those little tidbits and pearls of knowledge, I think, are really valuable. So let's start out and talk about some of our approaches. When it comes to the biologics process, there's so many different ways to get the job done, right? We've got doing our own prior authorizations directly through the insurance company, using AI, using Cover My Meds, using specialty pharmacies. There's so many different ways that you can kind of create your workflow, streamline that. So what are some proactive strategies that you've implemented to streamline the prior authorization process or those workflows within your office?
I'll go first. So I actually just completely have switched the way that I do things. I came from an office where we accepted every insurance under the sun, and I probably had maybe 4 to 5 thousand patients. So there was one of me with a lot of them. So I really struggled with, a good workflow to be able to dedicate my time. And I did have to rely on specialty pharmacy, especially for Medicaid patients. Now I work for a private practice that doesn't do a whole lot of Medicaid or any at all, no VA, nothing like that. So I can do all my PAs, and I feel like doing them myself, like through every single patient and not using specialty pharmacy for anything, I have a lot less denials. But also, whenever I came into this practice, there MAs were very good at charting, and I didn't have to fix anything. I didn't have to ask for anything. Their doctors are really, really strict on that. But I feel like there's a lot of time cut with doing PAs myself.
Mm-hmm.
10%.
I've been doing both. Actually, it's one thing we were talking about earlier with 2025. I feel like in the years past, we did rely on specialty pharmacies and we did, the enhancements of the specialty pharmacies and how they can advocate for us, as BCs in the office. But with insurance changes with third parties, I just feel like it does cut out the middleman a lot whenever you do your own prior authorizations. So I feel like 2025 has been a little bit of a learning curve for me because it's not just one way anymore. It's not just we're going to do it like this and we're going to, it's going to go this way and that way and everything's going to be like it used to. I feel like when you get to a dead end, you have to kind of like shift. I do it both.
Yeah.
Like, like the variety.
I think that, when I talk to new biologic coordinators, the one thing I like to try to tell them, because I know when I was starting out, I would take any information I could, but I hated when people said, well, you should do it this way or you should do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
What works best for your office and your practice. Nobody knows that better than you guys. You know what your providers want, you know what they require, you know what your timelines are with your patients because patient load is different. I agree with Trinity. I recently started using more of Cover My Meds and doing my own instead of sending to like an enhanced specialty pharmacy. I will still use them like Shannon does from time to time. There's that instance. I found out from another biologic coordinator via networking that in modernizing medicine, which is the system we use, Emma, you can actually look up and pull up the patient specialty pharmacy. So by sending it to that specialty pharmacy from the get-go, the turnaround time for approval and patient medication in the patient's hand is key. I mean, it gets to them so much faster. So why would I not? I mean, that's just kind of the way it's been working out here. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how, for me, when I first started, I was like, okay, I need to learn everything. And then I started using the specialty pharmacies. And then I was like, I think I can do this myself. And then I was like, I'm not using a specialty pharmacy. But then when you realize and understand the process, you get to understand that, okay, there's multiple ways to do this. And so I have to be able to be flexible with that approach, right? And
100%.
the best way to be proactive is understanding the process, number one, but also still having that flexibility to say, you know what, I need to change it up sometimes. And there might be an instance where I can do it a lot faster through a specialty pharmacy, or I can do it a lot faster through Cover My Meds. But it's just having the understanding of being able to be flexible with that and know, okay, this one, it might be a little bit difficult plan. I'm going to send this over to the specialty pharmacy and they can help me out versus me trying to rack my brain and spend 45 minutes on something that I can easily send off and get 2 or 3 other things done. So it's being strategic about how you are handling that process and knowing that you can change that up a little bit sometimes. Everything doesn't have to be set in stone and that's the only way to go because it's the wrong mindset, I think, sometimes. So when it comes to collaborating, that's another big thing that I think is so important is collaborating with your team, collaborating with the providers, collaborating with the specialty pharmacies, and for patients as well. What are some things that you do to make sure that you're able to collaborate to smooth out that process?
So for me, and this goes even back to the first question of like the process and how you go about doing it. When you're changing the process, when you have one certain way of doing it, educating the MAs that you work with, the front desk, the check-in, everyone that you work with, like this is the information I need and this is how we're going to go about doing it. But just like in my case, when I do switch from, say, using an enhanced specialty pharmacy to doing it on my own, it looks a little different to the nurses and to the patient. So, when the MA is in the room and they're educating the patient on what happens next, that's huge. That's so important for patient communication and to educate the patient on, I feel like especially more this year than ever of being their own advocate, answering the phone, educating themselves on their treatment and what the pathway looks like for them. So I'll call my patients and have a conversation with them sometimes, especially if the pathway is going to change. If I'm not using an enhanced specialty pharmacy, if I am doing it on my own, the pathway has changed. I'm going to call them and let them know that, hey, look, there's a couple of different ways we can go about doing this. We're going to do this first. If this doesn't work, we're going to go this way, but stay with me here.
Right.
Yeah, that's very important to communicate with your office staff on your process and how you are going to manage the, access and the biologics.
Yeah.
For me, communication is key. I agree with Shannon. You have to have communication not only with your patients and let them know, every time there's a change, you can't contact everybody all the time. But when there are these big changes and it's going to affect how they're seeing things and how the phone calls are coming through or the text messages, they need to know about that. I think communication in the office is also very important. I know sometimes, depending upon the provider, they're not easily accessible, but I try to keep in touch with them throughout the day, or at least, once a week if there's been a change to a medication or a new medication or, whatever the case may be, that they're informed and that the MAs on the floor are informed.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
I think too, like, being in office and being remote, like that's been a very huge, huge change for me. Sometimes I have to rely on my reps and FRMs to educate my office staff because I only have contact with, my lead MA, and
Mm-hmm.
my providers prefer to communicate digitally, so I don't actually speak to them on the phone ever. I speak to my lead MA on the phone, but keeping up with everything else, through proper documentation as well, so that way the whole team does know where you're at, especially if they use modernizing medicine and use, like, even if you think it's irrelevant as a biologic coordinator, to a medical assistant who's trying to relay a message to a patient, it might be the one little detail that makes it make a full circle for the patient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just encouraging patients, that we need to work on this together. Like in the past years, biologic coordinators have been kind of told, like, we're going to take care of it for you. Don't worry, we've got you. And it's kind of all fallen on our shoulders to get the medicine for the patient. So more lately, it's been, hey, thanks for helping me out here. I'll tell patients that, thank you so much. Any information you get from the specialty pharmacy or from your insurance or from your Medicare Part D plan, call me, let me know. Let's do this together, Whereas before I was just kind of like, I got you. It's
Well,
changed.
I feel like it's the other way around too sometimes, where it's, oh yeah, the bio coordinator, she can do it. She's got this. She'll
Yeah,
she'll handle it all for us, and we don't have to worry about anything else. I
how
think,
it has been in the past. Yeah.
yeah, I really think that it's definitely a full office approach. Everybody plays such an important role in the process. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that, we all are helping our patients get access, whether you're front office, getting insurance cards, back office, MAs, making sure you've got the proper documentation, obviously the doctors, but even the phone, anybody who's answering phones, back office, patients are calling in, they want to know an update. So we all play such an important role in understanding the patient's side of view. They're coming in for a problem and it's not a burden for, when the patient calls and they're grumpy because they're dealing with something that, is a chronic condition for the most
Mm-hmm.
part and they're not curable. So it's important for us to have that compassion and understanding and realize that, it's important for everybody to understand you may not do the process, but it's definitely important for you to understand the process and understand what it is that we're doing, what we're dealing with. And, and I hear so much how people kind of look at dermatology as, oh, it's a fun specialty. You get Botox and you get, it's so much more than that. And we are dealing with some serious conditions, skin issues, and there's a lot of depression, anxiety, stress that we are working with our patients to really help them through hard times. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so important for everybody to have a good understanding of the access side, even if you're not physically doing those prior authorizations. because it is more than the prior auth, and there's so much education that goes into it. I'm huge on that. Like, I love educating the whole office. It's not just me. Yes, I'm doing the brunt of the work and making sure that those PAs are approved and all of the other things, enrolling patients into bridge programs or patient assistance and writing appeals and things like that. But it definitely takes a team to be able to get our patients access. And I think that's one thing that I want everybody to understand, that it's more than just the prior authorization.
Yeah. Yeah.
I let the
Um,
team know that, we are a team. Like, we're working on this together, and it's almost like being a legal team. We're attorneys and we're fighting to get these patients medication. I need every bit of information that you have. I'm not always in the room with the patient. If that patient is itchy, I need to know. I need to know the scores. I need to know tried and failed, and I want to know specific tried and failed. Don't just put
mhm.
topical steroids tried and failed. I want the list, and I want all of it. And I want quality of life. If it's affecting their job or how they interact with their family, I want all of it in there. You wouldn't go to a murder trial and tell somebody, well, I just think they're innocent. You're not going to win. We need to win, and we need all of that. So they're helping, and we're all on the same team, and it's all for the same cause, for the patient to get the medication. I do think, though, it's important that our patients are also educated and they feel like they're part of the process. Like Shannon touched on, patients who know that we are partnering with them, but they still have a fight in the game too. They need to do their part as well. I always let them know I give them a handout in the beginning and let them know this is kind of what to expect. You're going to have to come in and see us. You're going to have to follow up. If you have questions, please feel free to call and talk to me directly. Here's a direct line. I'm your person. I can definitely help you with these things. I don't want them to stress. We all know stress is a cause for flares. So I tell them, let me stress for you. But in the process, we need to work together to get this medication. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as tools and templates go, because obviously it's so helpful to have some resources that we can kind of pull off of. And we're not going to leave everybody empty handed. If you guys see at the top of the screen, there's a little pin that says materials next to the question box. If you guys click on there, there is two little files that you can download, which are great resources. And Shannon, I'm gonna let you talk about that because that is one of your resources that you've created, and I think is amazing. And I appreciate you sharing that with everyone.
Yes, thank you. My girls, I call them my girls, my nurses, my MAs, they love it, and, going even back to what you just said, the communication in the office is so important. The biologics are changing, they're getting new indications. They're seeing, schedule changes with the new indications. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Next thing you know, we have a new AD drug. There's like so many of them. And so really to, break it all down, the nurses, the MAs, they're in the rooms with the patients. They are educating the patient. So the more equipment we give them to educate them, the patient, the better. Not only that, but just to be able for them to understand the drug themselves. For those listening, even, we probably have all, have those MAs or nurses that are like, oh, Shannon's got it. I don't have to know about that. Shannon's got it. But, I don't, right? It's not just me. So we need to educate the patients and to e-scribe it correctly if they are doing e-scribing or, whatever the case is super important. I like having this tool here just, in literally arm's length from, the nurses there type, scribing for the doctor, communicating with them, and it's all right there. If the doctor spouts out that they want to use this biologic, the nurse can look on there, see what labs are needed, and what the diagnosis needs to be, what the dosing is going to be, and the labs. Let's talk about that. All there. I've had so much trouble recently with patients not going to get their labs, and you can't do a PA without it, and you can't get your medicine without a TB. So again, every couple of months, I do like to just get in front of my office and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's been holding me up lately. Is there anything I can do for y'all to help improve this? This is kind of the little roadblocks that I've been facing. So what I did recently was I took my biologics and the dosing guide and everything, and I put those labs needed next to the diagnosis. So we'll all be, like I said, on the same page, and we can all educate the patients and be educated ourselves in how to order those labs and things like that.
I
I
always
think
try to tell the medical assistants that they're like the bread to my butter because like I always like a lot of the times like medical assistants feel like inferior to a BC. And I always tell them like if you guys did not go in the room and talk to these patients and chart, like I could not do my job. Like you are my person. Like I rely on you more than you would ever know. Like and I
Mhm.
always try to like make them feel good about it because a lot of the times they're like, "Oh, I hate biologics. I hate it. This is
They
awful." They
do.
see it and they're like, I don't
And
want
they're
that." And I'm like,
usually
"No."
we're usually going to them with a problem, right? Like, did you get the patient's weight? Did you get the patient's weight? Did you get the
Yeah.
patient's weight? It really. And so it's a good thing for us to go back and be like, hey, this was a really good chart note. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, as a BC, that is like, we rely on those MAs and nurses in the room so much.
A lot of them are afraid to talk to their provider in the room, and I'm like, flip that iPad around and be like, okay, what is this drug? What is this? What does BSA mean? I can explain it all day long, but they need to rely on the provider too because these providers are a wealth of knowledge, and they go to these talks just like we do, so like they know it as well. And I think sometimes they're just afraid to ask the provider, like the medical assistants, like those are my people. And if there's any MAs on here that work on the floor, like thank you so much. Not know how much I appreciate you guys.
yeah.
Ditto. Yeah. If we couldn't do it without them. I mean, all of you MAs out there, I consider you like BCs in training because a lot of time that's what end up happening. I mean, technically, I don't know what happens when you ladies are out of the office, but if I go on vacation or I'm out ill or something should happen, somebody else has got to pick up the slack and I count on them. Their job is huge and I really appreciate everything they do. I tell them all the time, I'm not just being the documentation police. I'm not just running around telling you I need this because I need this. There's a
Right.
reason. And I think that they understand and I hope they know the appreciation that we have for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. So, I have a question that popped over. It says, when MDs are switching patients to different biologics, is it okay for MDs to amend previous chart notes to reflect change, or should the patient have a new office visit?
I always, if it's that note from that day or from the day before or 2 days before, something like that, I will send my provider a message to ask them to amend. I don't think they need to make a new note because a lot of times, they'll put in something for coding and it'll cause a new problem with billing. So I think an amendment to the note is usually the best way to do it. At least that's the way I find.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm 50-50 on that. It depends on what it's for. Like, say if you have a commercial patient, like now Taltz is excluded from CVS Caremark and they're wanting like Bemzelix or something like that. If it's something like that, I can understand like not making the patient come back for that because that's not something that's like truly wrong. But if like the patient's having issues on the medicine and they're having to switch it or like something like that, like I would prefer the patient to be seen and like truly go over these things with the doctor because I'm not a doctor. And I think there is a fine line between an amendment and like actually needing a whole new note.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to move on to challenges. What are the most frequent access challenges have you faced in 2025 so far, and how are you approaching it? Who wants to start? Tammy, you want to jump?
I will start. So one of my biggest challenges is third parties. They just pop up out of nowhere. Like it's like new ones that I've never even heard of before. So
Mhm.
trying to figure out what I'm needing to do and what they're needing from me is extremely hard. So Basically, what I've done to, I guess, work through the problem of third parties is to get on the phone with them. What's your process here? What do I need to do? Who is this pharmacy you're telling me to send this medicine to? I've never even heard of this pharmacy before. When I send it over, is the patient going to pay anything? Is the patient responsible for a copay? Are we needing to go through copay assistance? Can they use their copay assistance card with this new mandated pharmacy? To me, I feel like here lately, the third parties have been one of my hardest hurdles to jump. And then just being able to get on the phone with them and talk to them about their process and what I need to do to follow their rules, right? To do what they need me to do to get the patient medicine. So whatever that looks like. And then, also relying on your FRMs, right? Relying on your field reimbursement manager to work that out with you. Like, hey, I just heard of this new third party and this new pharmacy. Have you heard of it before? And then she'll get on the phone or he'll get on the phone and they'll do their research and then I'll do mine and we'll come back together and, discuss it. So it's interesting and it can be okay. But it's just another little hurdle that we have to jump as biologic coordinators.
Absolutely.
That was also on my list, like the third party payers, accumulators, maximizers. Like every time you turn around, you see there's somebody new, there's something else. Your FRMs, we haven't really touched on that so much, but I think that it's huge. When I started this process 13 years ago, there was no such thing as an FRM. And now I know my FRMs by first name. We are on speed dial. I call them constantly. They want to hear from you. So if you are a BC out there and you don't know your FRM, I cannot tell you enough how important it is because they can see all the behind the scene things. The accumulated maximizers, third party payers, there's always something new. I had a guy who ghosted for a full year and then showed up out of the blue, and I was like, hold him in the room, I'm coming, I need to know what's going on. I get over there and find out that he's been getting medicine from outside the country. He's got like this special thing on his plan, and that's probably a whole nother subject we could dive into another time, but there's always something new. So yes, I think those third party payers are really a difficult challenge for us. See, collaborative though, like if you put a note up there, other BCs have come across some of this stuff, and that's where I find the networking really helps.
100%, yes.
I would say Medicare prescription payment plan. I mean, I would say that I understand it and like I know what's going on now, but like I feel like the number one question that I get asked is, "Are they going to do this next year?" And I'm like, is it a permanent solution?
Right.
I don't know. She's like, well, should I plan to budget for this next year? And I'm like, I can't answer any of these questions because we don't know. But then also too, like I feel like now that it's, it's almost the middle of the year and some of these patients have just hanging and you're still working on it. But now some of my FRMs are like, did you know you can write a letter if they're on the cusp of having to pay for it or get patient assistance? Like they can plead their case and say they can't afford it. They can show proof of other costs. And I'm like, okay, you have all of these workarounds. And then too, like I feel like now the patients are in three categories because you have your lower patients who need low income subsidy, but the Social Security Administration takes 60 to 90 days where I'm at. I'm not sure where everyone else is, but like takes 60 to 90 days. So your patient's sitting in limbo for that long. And then like sometimes you can't explain to an older patient struggling that they have to go and sit on the phone with the Social Security Administration for 2 hours to get a letter to get their medicine. So I feel like, although there is three tiers and a lot of the Medicare prescription payment plan patients I have enjoy it, they don't enjoy having to pay for it. They say it's a lot easier to get their medicine instead of having to deal with patient assistance.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they've thrown us for a loop, but they haven't told us, hey, this is going to be the same for next year. So all of those patients are just hanging. And then it's going to be like the end of the year when we're already worrying about Medicare changes and patient assistance renewals. We're going to have to just sit here and wait. And then it's going to be like go time. And then we're going to have to figure out what to do in 2026.
I'm a big fan that with the MP3 for 2026, like Trinity, is like just not knowing what the next year is going to bring. My concern really is like, they say there's no late fee, there's no, they're not going to send you to collections or anything. So what if you have a patient at the end of 2025 that hasn't paid hardly any of the $2,000? Will they allow them to move on in 2026, or will
Right,
they stop them? Will it be a hard no then?
right.
So these are the kind of things we're going to have to keep our eyes open for.
Yeah, it's like nobody knows and it's a waiting game. So then like you start to perfect, I don't know if you guys like perfect what you say to a patient. Like I'm very repetitive
Mhm.
and I will say the same thing and then I feel more comfortable talking about it. So then it's like, okay, I've kind of perfected my conversation and then it's going to have to change again. So I'm going to be on the phone like, like I feel like I'm spitting and stuttering and the patients are like, do you know what you're talking about? I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I always want to feel confident for the patients, when I talk to them, but like whenever we have these changes thrown at us with no explanation, no rhyme or reason, it's really hard for me to feel confident in what I'm trying to help them with because I'm like, well, this just might be a trial run.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of patients, so what are some of the common roadblocks that you're facing with patient onboarding or education, and how do you overcome those?
hmm The incomplete documentation. And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, discussing, communicating with the nurses and the staff on what we need in that chart note. And, whether it's the correct diagnosis, the patient's weight, have you started them in office with their loading dose? I can't do anything without knowing where I am in the treatment, right? So yes, incomplete documentation.
It seems so simple to us biologic coordinators whenever we say incomplete documentation to just be like, oh, we'll just do it right. But, when you're in the room and you're hearing the provider talk, you're looking at the patient's talking, you're on an iPad, you're typing 100 miles an hour. Like, it's
I
so
get it. Hmm.
it's so easy to miss things. And then, like, when you really sit down and think about it, it's like, oh, well, I should have done that and I should have done that. But,
Hmm.
sometimes they're rushing you so much in a room that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand why it's hard to document properly. But at the same time,
Mhm.
it's like they just have to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And also, a lot of what we need is subjective. Am I right? Like the itch factor, things like that, location. So, giving your office little handouts to give to patients, maybe to, let them document their itch severity, the circle where it's located on their body. They might not want to tell you everywhere that it is. Are they getting sleep disturbances? What is, different things like that. You can build that for your office and, and educate and encourage your nurses to give that to the patients, which would help a lot with documentation and us
Yeah.
on the PA end.
100%. I agree with the documentation thing. I mean, the prior authorization changing, we know that it happens. I mean, methotrexate was on for the longest time and then it kind of fell off. Now it's back again. It's reared its ugly head. So, I mean, we, as the biologic coordinators, we can change our level of where we're going and what we're looking for. Burnout and competing priorities. I think that there's ways that we can handle burnout and doing that, but the incomplete documentation has, for me in my career, been the number one reason why we have holdups and slowdowns. And there's not always a good answer other than please document. If you didn't
Mhm.
document it, it didn't happen. And so again, we're trying to get the patient the medication that the doctor wants them to have, and we need to fight for that. So we need all the ammunition we can get.
And it's
Mhm.
all based off of that one document. And that's what makes me so angry sometimes because I'm like, okay, I can upload pictures, but sometimes they're like, oh, I don't want pictures. But, the one singular chart note makes or breaks the deal when I could sit here and plead their case for 2 hours.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
For those who put burnout on there, I have, and I don't know if y'all agree with me, but there's times where I sit at my desk and I'm like, I have nothing to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know what.
Hmm.
So I set it to the side and I come back. Sometimes, I'll come back that afternoon and I'm like, why didn't you think about this before? Like, wait, oh, I know what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, let's do it like this. So if you're getting burnout and you're getting overwhelmed, put it to the side, and come back to it. There's so many times that I come back to something and I'm like, okay, what were you thinking? This is plain as day to me, but it's just walking away for a minute. So
I
that,
have a really hard time delegating tasks because I was always kind of like, okay, well, I know if I do it, it'll get done and I don't have to like explain 57 times how to do something. So like
yeah.
I have a really hard time like delegating tasks to someone, but now I just feel like I have to rely on my lead MA sometimes because she's in the office, and although we may see two different perspectives, like we have to collab together to
Hmm.
be able to complete the task. So I think that comes with time because like I used to worry like, oh, if I get a denial, this patient's never going to get a med. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
now I can do an appeal. I'll just do bridge. So
Yeah.
delegating tasks, I think, does help with burnout, but that's based on every office.
Right. Yeah.
And breathe. Walk away from your desk for a minute, like Shannon said. Just take a walk around the building, say hi to people, clear your head.
Mhm.
Can't tell you how many times, if you get a denial, you're always like, God, that denial. But sometimes you don't really read through it. Come back, look at it, read through it. Sometimes it's as easy as, oh, they didn't see the lab. I had one the other day. No teeth.
Yes.
Well, it's in there. So you call them back, you let them know, they review it. They're like, okay, there's an approval. So
Hmm.
don't beat yourself up. If you get a denial or you come to a halt, take a breath, walk away, and then come back. I think that's a great thing to do.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about wins. What does success look like in your role?
So for me, having your patients advocate for themselves, being able to have that communication with your patients and definitely, focus on the wins. Know that a denial isn't the end of the road. Letting your patient know that the denial is not the end of the road, and that, y'all are in this together and you're gonna get to the bottom of it, whether it's through patient assistance or beating that third party, or sending over your appeals and finally getting an approval on your second level appeal. Sometimes that's what happens. So I do love focusing on the wins. I love going, through my faxes and seeing approved, approved, approved. And then I take the denials and I put them to the side and I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to you later. And let's just, let's focus on the approvals and then make sure that the patients are filling at the pharmacy, right? That's the other thing. We can get them approved all day long, but having them actually talk to the pharmacy and fill the medicine and then coming back in the office. So let's talk about that for just a second. Having the patients come in for follow-ups afterward, right? So to me, a win is, yes, getting an approval, but it's also getting the patient to understand the medication, understand the treatment, and then having them come in for follow-ups. Don't be a lost to follow-up. We deal with psoriasis and atopic dermatitis all day long. I feel like lost to follow-ups are kind of the name of the game sometimes.
Yeah.
So that just, again, just encouraging the office staff, the MAs, like encourage that patient to come in for that follow-up. We really need to see that for chart note purposes, for, reauthorizations, things like that. So yeah.
100%.
Wins for me, ultimately, is getting the patient the medication that the doctor wants them to have. So, like you said, when you get those approvals, I have been known to do a little happy dance at my desk from time to time. You get that, and you're like, yes. But then there's the part where you get the denial. And inherently, I'm not a fighter. I don't really have that in me. When I became a biologic coordinator, I found it really quick.
Me too.
It's something that I want to do. I try every day to do it better. I really find with the appeals and the letters of exception and exclusion, ChatGPT works wonderful. AI has been great. If I could say anything to our new biologic coordinators about this, because I know you guys are seasoned, and there was a time when we heard appeal where you're like, oh God, I gotta type a letter. Don't stress. Do not stress. Chat GPT, look it up. It's great. It will help you. And I have had so many wins lately with non-formulary with Chat GPT. It's been fabulous. So don't stress. Win for your patient.
I'm
Mhm.
gonna go on a different kind of way with my wins. A win to me is a compliant patient, a patient that understands their medicine, a
Mhm.
patient that comes in, a patient that is, taking their medicine as they're supposed to, they're cleared up, They're getting their labs as they're supposed to. I'm not having to call them and be like, hey, me
Mhm.
again. Hey, me again. You know, like to me, that's what makes me feel good because they understand why I do what I do. So
Yeah.
they not waste my time. I'm not saying that these patients waste our time, but like it makes you feel like, okay, I'm actually getting somewhere. They
Mhm.
understand their condition, you know? And
Mhm.
I don't know about y'all, but when I have to call a patient 7 times to come in for an appointment, by that point, I'm just like, do you want your medicine or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When a win could be whenever we see the patient in office and they're like, Shannon, and I'm like, hi, and we hug, and we're like, you're so glad you're doing better. The other way to look at that is you see a patient and you're like, oh no, like, like, oh God, they saw me, So yeah, wins can definitely be like when you see those patients in the office and they're doing so well and they're so happy and you know that you did a good job.
And
Yeah.
looking at the poll, like grateful patient feedback and providers recognizing your work, that'll make you feel good for the moment. But whenever you see these charts come up every 6 months to a year and you're seeing the patient putting in the effort and that it's working, I think that's like a long-term win because like we've said, these are chronic conditions. They're starting to feel comfortable with their provider. They're starting to feel comfortable with the medical assistants. Like they just come in and tell you straight up, okay, I'm not flared up, but this will flare me up. They're comfortable and you're not having to draw and pry out their answers.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
agree. I mean, there's so many wins, I feel like, in this role, and I feel like that's part of the reason why we do this, why we continue to do this. I know we touched a little bit about the burnout thing, but, when we're reminded of why, when we're working through all of these denials to get something approved, when we have our whole office staff working together and everybody is on the same page when it comes to access and making sure that they're aware. I don't necessarily need, everybody to see how great I'm doing. Oh yeah, you're great at getting everybody approved. You've got, all of these approvals and minimizing the denials. That's a win for the whole team. That means that my staff is getting the enrollment forms signed from patients or getting those insurance cards. The MAs are documenting properly, and I'm communicating with my providers to make sure that they've done all the step therapy that's needed, or whatever. The win is that all coming together, and everybody's getting things done. But at the same time, also the patient education piece as well, because if we're all doing everything that we can do and the patient isn't educated, you're missing a piece. So when everything kind of falls into place, that's a win. And it's really hard to get to that place, but it is attainable. It is something that can be done as long as we're continuously working towards that.
I want to add one thing to the cleaner, faster workflow that sticks.
Mhm.
Um, if anyone has ever like worked with me, I'm slow. I am so slow at this job. Like I'm not Speedy Gonzalez for anything. And my clean versus someone else's clean, like maybe something completely different. So like we're all very unique in our own ways because all of our offices are different. So like I think providers and MAs and patients don't understand sometimes when it does take time. Like, if I'm on the phone with a patient for 40 minutes because they're explaining their frustrations and I'm trying to educate them and teach them, and like, oh, why'd you waste 40 minutes? And I'm like, that's a win. I just educated them for 40 minutes on solving their problems to get their medication because there was a barrier to their access. So, like, sometimes I feel like being fast at this job is not always the best way. Like, some PAs, sure, I can do in 30 seconds, but some PAs I'm sitting here looking at like for 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, should I put this answer or this answer? Even though I've probably done it 100 times.
Mhm.
Like, I just feel like sometimes being fast may not always be the way to go, especially for myself, because I would rather take the time to do it right the first time than have to write an appeal or have to explain to a patient 6 times that they've been denied. So it doesn't always have to be about how fast you can get things done. And I'm sure, you have patients waiting and there's one of us to however many patients that we have.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Okay, so some peer learning as we kind of move in, we're kind of hitting time here, but let's go to the lightning round real quick. What's your go-to move when a patient goes MIA mid-approval process?
Um,
Tammy.
The phone call, the phone call, the phone call. So I have to tell you, I give it 3 attempts solidly, and then I try one more the following day, and then, maybe another week later. But at some point, you have to walk away.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Let's see. The patient sticker shock. What do you say when patient hears their cost and wants to back out? Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What insurance do you have? Are you private pay? Are you Medicare? Most of the time with sticker shock, it's going to be a Medicare patient. So what's the process look like with getting your patient enrolled in the M3P program, talking to the patient, educating them, and then moving forward with PAP if needed. But just letting your patient know that there's more than one way to get access without having to pay that lump sum copay immediately. There's ways to go about it. So yeah.
Yeah, good one. Okay, prior auth PTSD. What is your go-to strategy for staying calm and confident in the chaos? Trinity.
I don't. I have no calm because I am chaotic. It is going to be flying by the seat of my pants on each PA to make sure it's done right. I have no rhyme or rhythm. And I always tell MAs, like, I take each person and I break it down into really who they are and what their situation is. So there's never two patients that I handle the same.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rhonda put in the question, it was mentioned about ModMed, how you can look up what specialty pharmacy is required and where do we look for that. I don't know if Tammy, you can hit on that one real quick.
Yes, if you go to Modernize Medicine in the patient's first page and you see the drop down field on the left hand side, you're going to see RX plans. Hit RX plans and it will bring up your specialty pharmacy. It's an amazing thing. Check it out.
Yes.
You do have to make sure at the top that you have a provider.
That is correct. Make sure you have your provider up there.
Okay. I appreciate all of you ladies for joining me. I feel like we need to definitely do this again because there's so many questions and topics that we could hit on that could be so valuable. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to send us an email, fill out your surveys so we can get some feedback from you. We would love to do this again and we hope to see you guys next time. Thank you ladies for joining me.
Thank you so much. Bye, girls.
Bye everyone. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me and listening to That's Derm Good. You can expect new episodes of That's Derm Good every week. The podcast is available on your favorite app, including where you're listening right now. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new episode. Bye.